Hello, weary listener. You're not just about to hear strange stories. You're about to face the uncomfortable fact that for centuries, fully grown adults believed that a broken mirror sucked out your soul, that onions cured envy, and that cutting your hair on the wrong day could sour your entire life. You there in the 20th century, surrounded by Wi-Fi, air fryers, and rationality, more or less, are about to walk through a world where a simple yawn could mean something was watching you. And it wasn't your cat. It was destiny, or worse, the gossiping neighbor, which was far scarier. All of this was taken seriously, very seriously. Throughout this night, you will explore the most bizarre superstitions of the Middle Ages. A time when Netflix didn't exist, but entertainment included throwing people into lakes to see if they floated, literally. Before we embark on this journey of medieval mystical absurdities, do a favor for the algorithm and for my self-esteem. Subscribe to the channel, because if you don't, YouTube thinks nobody likes a boring story and stops delivering the videos. Then I continue here talking to myself and the wall, and even the wall can't take it anymore. And take the opportunity to give this video a little hype. Just in case YouTube understands that this content isn't just a historical breakdown of mine. It is a lifestyle among people who don't sleep, but like to hear about ancient misery in a calm voice. Oh, and comment below what time it is there. It is always good to know there are more people trying to sleep while hearing about people who believed mirrors sucked souls. Now turn off the light, adjust your pillow, preferably without fleas, and let boredom take over. Let us travel to a time when superstition was the rule and logic was a luxury item that no one sold at the fair. You are in the 10th century. The air smells of hay, smoke, and irrational fear. You wake up, or rather, you open your eyes in the dark, and the first thing you see is a crow at the window. A crow. Today, that might seem gothic or poetic, like an indie witch book cover, but back then, it was a sign of imminent doom. Saw a crow? Better start preparing your will. Not that anyone will understand what you wrote. In the Middle Ages, everything was a sign. Everything, a demonic black cat, a thunderclap in the middle of Mass. God is irritated. A loaf of bread that fell, burnt side up. The devil passed through the kitchen. You take a deep breath and leave the house, but you step out with your left foot. Left foot starts things wrong, literally, because the left side was associated with evil. If you were left-handed, well, good luck. The very word sinister comes from Latin and means left. Coincidence? No, just paranoia. You already wake up wrong just for existing with the wrong hand. As you cross the village, you notice that no one sweeps their house after dark. And it's not laziness. The idea was that sweeping at night didn't just clean the floor, it swept away your luck. And if you made the gesture, people would run alongside you to throw holy water, or in the worst case, stones. Because, you know, a symbolic warning isn't enough. You consider cutting your hair. It's long, itchy, and full of life. In this case, lice. But then you remember cutting hair on certain days could attract disgrace, like Friday or Monday, or any day an elder said wasn't good. And when in doubt, you spend another week with an itchy head and a restless soul. Incidentally, speaking of hair, losing strands wasn't just an invitation to go bald. It could be interpreted as a sign of spiritual deviation. If your forehead started to grow mysteriously, they already saw this as an indication of divine guilt, or at least a talent for unsettling the priest. It was more or less the message, don't lose strands. The soul is exposed. And of course, laughing during Mass. That was fuel for local gossip. And be careful with that hair loose in the fervor of faith. You continue walking and find a frog jumping in your direction. In the real world, this could become a meme. In the Middle Ages, it was like receiving a spiritual subpoena. Frogs or toads were seen as witches' helpers or signs of bad luck. If it stared at you with that judgmental eye, and months later you found yourself stumbling through a fever with blisters, the blame wasn't on the doctor. It was, at the very least, on the frog or the witch who sent it. But nothing beats the fear of the full moon. You thought it was beautiful, didn't you? Clear sky, natural brightness, romantic vibe. In the Middle Ages, the full moon was basically an alarm. People believed it amplified everything bad: outbreaks, possessions, nervous breakdowns, cramps. Yes, even that. Everything was the moon's fault. There were people who locked their doors and spent the night praying, because what if the moon decides to visit? And if by some aesthetic miracle you had a mirror at home, you'd better hide it for real, because there it wasn't just a piece of glass with a reflection, it was a species of spiritual Wi-Fi, medieval version. There were people who believed the mirror functioned as an open window to the beyond, and that if you left it uncovered at night or during a storm, it was basically a VIP invitation for spirits to enter. A sort of come in, make yourself at home. And it doesn't stop there. If someone died in the house, the first thing to do was cover all the mirrors, just in case the deceased soul decided to take a stroll and accidentally got trapped in the reflection. Then presto, soul retained in the mirror, bad luck guaranteed, and nights of endless whispering. And beware of vanity. If you looked at yourself too much in the mirror, besides the suspicion of narcissism, a grave offense at the time, you still ran the risk of being accused of wanting to communicate with the beyond, or of flirting with the reflection, or having your soul sucked by the frame. It depends on the neighborhood's creativity. And all of this, absolutely all of it, was taken seriously, very seriously, to the point of becoming law, punishment, persecution. Medieval superstition wasn't just a belief, it was a system, an informal manual of constant mistrust. And you, even without doing anything, were already automatically wrong for breathing, for walking with your left foot, for dreaming of goats, for looking at an owl. And while you worry because you forgot to knock on wood, you leave the house with the constant sensation that you are being observed. Not by someone exactly, but by forces, energies, things that no one sees, but everyone swears exist. And you don't want to risk it, right? After all, what if one of those things hears your skeptical thought and decides to give you bad luck just out of spite? You take 2 steps and slip in some suspicious mud. Terrible sign. Slipping early in the day is an omen of a bad day. A priest would probably say it's the fault of your impure soul. A peasant would say you stepped with the wrong foot again, and you honestly just wanted to take a bath. But bathing in this era is already considered a superstition in itself. Washing the body will scare away the good spirits. Better to stay dirty and protected. While trying to balance dignity and mud, you pass an old lady with a broom in hand. She is sweeping from the door outward, always outward, because sweeping inward attracts disgrace, misery, and according to some local theories, premature baldness. Yes, even the direction of the broom stroke was mystical. And you, who barely sweep your room, are now wondering if this explains your financial life. Further ahead, you cross paths with a group of women trading stickers, or rather, recipes against evil. Each has a favorite herb. One swears that hanging rue behind the door wards off the evil eye. The other defends garlic hung around the neck, which besides protection also wards off unwanted suitors. The third has a small bag of salt tied to her ankle. Why? Because. And you start to think if you should wear one too, not for the mysticism, but for the style. Who knows, maybe it becomes a trend in 1342. You try to ignore everything, but on the way, you step on a crack in the street stone, and now that fear hits. Does this break your family's luck, break destiny, break your mother's back? The answers vary, but they are all terrible. When in doubt, you start walking in a zigzag, dodging anything that has a remotely dangerous shape. You don't believe in these things until they happen to you. You arrive at the market. You want to buy a turnip, just that. But the market is a festival of compacted superstitions, a microcosm of medieval paranoia. The vendor refuses to hand over change with his left hand. The woman at the egg stall spits on the ground 3 times before selling anything. And you just wanted a turnip. You leave with a turnip, a bit of trauma, and the certainty that no one there sleeps peacefully. As you return to the village, you notice a woman walking with her hair loose in the middle of the square, without a veil, without a clip. A scandal. In the Middle Ages, this wasn't style. It was almost a public conviction that she was challenging the divine order. Releasing the strands could mean, I am single and open to spiritual interpretations. Depending on the gossip here, this went from hello audacity to tomorrow there is a moral judgment. You try to avert your gaze, but you already feel the fingers of superstition tightening around your neck. Literally, because you swallowed dryly and remembered that today is the third day of the month, on a Wednesday with a waning moon. A combination that, according to the old man at the mill, is not good for breathing, and you, of course, are breathing. Big mistake. Your stomach growls. You think about eating that cheese forgotten at the bottom of the bag. But then you remember, cheese with mold could be contaminated by bad energy or could just be old. But in the Middle Ages, these two options are almost the same thing. You bite. The taste is doubtful, the texture too. A reckless decision, but it's done. To make matters worse, you pass a child with a strange branch in their hand. They point at you and say, you will stumble before the afternoon ends. And that's it. Your afternoon is ruined. Because a child in this era is basically a portable oracle. And if they speak, you believe. It's no use arguing. You will stumble, yes, and you will even be thankful if that's all it is. Incidentally, stumbling has a meaning all its own. Depending on the direction of the fall, the leg used, and the witness's reaction, the stumble could mean a curse, a sign of travel, an announcement of death, or a warning from the heavens. And yes, every village has its interpretation, which means stumbling in one city could be a blessing, and in the neighboring one, a sentence. Traveling was, among other things, a risk of superstitious interpretation, like saying good morning in the wrong language. You arrive home and decide to spit just to get the taste of the cheese out. Careful, spitting on the ground could offend the spirits of the earth, and spitting upward was an insult to the sky. What's left? Swallow dryly and pretend everything is fine. When it's time to sleep, you don't light a candle, because if it goes out alone, it's a sign of approaching death. If you light two, it might attract an unexpected visit. And in the Middle Ages, an unexpected visit is never good. It could be a debt collector, a priest, or a plague. You opt for total darkness. Better not to risk it. But of course, too dark is also a problem, because it leaves space for evil to enter. You decide to leave a tiny crack in the window, but with a cross made of twigs. The universal protection. If it doesn't work, at least it looks like rustic decoration, and you feel minimally at peace. A fragile, unstable piece full of ants. You lie down, try not to think about crows, moons, branches, prophetic children, or enchanted cheeses. You close your eyes with the lightness of someone who knows that if they dream of a tooth falling out, it means someone in the family will, well, they won't wake up very happy. And even if all of this is superstition, better not to doubt, because deep down you are still in the Middle Ages, where believing in invisible things was the only way to explain why everything went so wrong all the time. You wake up, or rather your eyes open, because sleeping is difficult. The hay poked, the straw made noise, and you spent half the night trying to remember if you locked the door with the wood in the right position. Because yes, even that matters. They say wood turned inward protects, outward invites bad things. It is now 5 a.m., maybe 6. The rooster hasn't even tried yet, but the village is already moving, and you are going to work too. Not that you have a choice. And before the day truly begins, you are already mentally reviewing everything you need to avoid to not become a superstitious statistic. You put on the usual tunic, the only one. It has stains that tell stories and a smell that dispenses with explanation. You think about putting an amulet underneath, hidden on your chest. The one you got from the neighbor, made with rabbit teeth and a piece of rope that was once used for serious business in the square. They say it protects. They say a lot of things. You use it because, well, why not? Before leaving, you throw a handful of salt in the corner of the door. Salt is sacred. It protects against envy, spirits, and with luck, even the tax collector. Just don't drop it. Dropping salt is like signing a contract with bad luck. So if it falls, throw it over your left shoulder. Always the left. No one knows exactly why. They just know it works, or it doesn't, but no one risks it. On the way to the field, you cross paths with a black cat stopped in the middle of the road. It looks at you, you look back. The duel begins. If it crosses in front of you, it's game over. You wait. It waits. No one moves. An old woman passes and spits on the ground, not at the cat, at destiny. The logic is confusing, but tradition commands. The cat leaves, you continue, but you step on a line of ants. Terrible idea. Ants in a row were a symbol of natural order. Breaking this could attract disorder in the harvest, and you, of course, need the harvest, because if the harvest fails, the fault is yours. Literally. Someone will remember the day you interrupted the procession of insects, and there is no logical argument that saves you. Arriving at the field, the work begins. Ploughing the earth, digging holes, planting, all very simple until someone sneezes. Stop everything. A loud sneeze without a blessing. It is a sign. The earth can absorb this bad omen and return it in the crop. So the people form a circle, pray, ring a bell. Yes, there was a portable bell for this, and only then resume the activity. You pretend not to be nervous, but inside you already feel a cough rising. Better to hold your breath. Someone drops a hoe on the ground with the handle facing up. This is also a sign of disgrace. Not because someone might trip, but because the tip of the tool pointing to the sky is disrespect. With whom? With all the saints and perhaps with the weather. Someone screams that it is your fault, you were too close. The blame is always on who is close. You keep sweating, carrying the bucket, trying to keep your head down, not because you are sad, although you are, but because looking directly at the sky on a cloudy day can be interpreted as a challenge. You challenge the weather, expect it to answer, with rain, hail, or a plague of locusts. The options are always bad. A gentleman passes chewing a weird herb. He says it serves to ward off tree spirits because apparently trees hold ancient souls. And if you cut the wrong one without asking permission, you might be haunted by nightmares with roots. You smile out of politeness, but note mentally, never cut wood after dusk. Lunchtime arrives, or rather, the moment to stop and chew whatever. You sit on a stone with care because sitting directly on the ground can transfer the heavy energy of the earth and you can't accumulate more weight. Your body already carries enough pain. The bread is hard, the cheese suspicious, but you eat and pray before, always. Eating without giving thanks can be understood as greed, and greed brings, one knows not what, but it brings it, and you are full of problems. In the middle of the meal, someone remembers today is Tuesday, and Tuesday's the worst day to cut hair, pull a tooth, or bake bread. You weren't going to do any of those things, but now you avoid even yawning. Because yes, yawning without covering your mouth is an invitation for evil spirits to enter straight through your mouth, like unwanted visitors at dinner time. A strange sound in the sky. It sounds like thunder, but the sky is clear. Someone makes the sign of the cross, another covers their head with a cloth. Another says it was the dragon of the mountain. No one laughs, because laughing at superstition is a sign of arrogance. And arrogance is punished, sometimes by invisible forces, sometimes by the group that decides to exclude you from the village's collective oven. You finish eating, or try to, because an insect lands on your plate. A bee, terrible sign. A bee in food indicates betrayal. You look to the sides. Who envies you? Who wants your ruin? Probably everyone, or no one, but the doubt is enough to ruin the taste, which was already bad. Back to work, more earth, more sweat, more silence. because talking too much during service can catch the attention of other presences. And if there is one thing no one wants, it is invisible attention. You hear a child singing alone, a strange song, a circular melody. Someone says, "That music attracts those who sleep in the fields." And everyone stops. Silence. No one breathes for 12 seconds. The afternoon falls, the sun cools, the shadows grow, and with them the precautions. Because late afternoon is a dangerous time. It is when things from the other side get more comfortable. You cannot whistle, you cannot bake bread, you cannot look through the keyhole. And if you hear your name being called by a voice you don't recognize, better not answer. You gather your tools, pass salt in your pockets again, and make the sign they taught you with 2 fingers and a twig. Does it work? Who knows? But so far you haven't turned to stone, nor lost an eye for looking at the moon. So you continue just in case. On the way back, darkening quickly, you avoid looking at the water mirror. They say, if the reflection blinks, it isn't you. And you already have enough problems dealing with a not you loose in the world. You arrive home in one piece, reasonably. You trip at the door, of course, because nothing is easy, but you enter, close, lock, breathe and think. Will tomorrow have less superstition? Internal spoiler, it won't. You are home, or rather in a structure of wood, mud and goodwill that insists on calling itself a home. The roof is still there, a bit crooked. The door creaks like a pre-apocalyptic warning. But you survived the day on the outside because inside is another story. The body itches a lot, a type of itch that has no time or compassion. On the back, on the scalp, in places where you would prefer not to have sensations. The reason could be fleas, could be lice, could be scabies, or could just be life itself. No one knows. You just know it itches and no one judges because everyone is scratching. Medieval life is a great festival of collective mycosis. You think about taking a bath, but then you remember bathing is serious business. Many people are suspicious of those who bathe too much. They say it opens the pores and invites diseases. That dirt creates a natural protective barrier. It is almost a spiritual shield made of sweat, grease and soot. You hesitate, wipe a wet cloth on your face, and hope this counts as purification. Your only basin of water has already been used to wash vegetables, rinse feet, bathe the neighbor's baby, and lastly, extinguish last night's candle. You look at it and realize the concept of cleanliness here is interpretive. Speaking of cleanliness, there is a new wound on your arm, small, but you already know this could turn into something bigger, maybe an inflammation, maybe a divine visit disguised as pus, because yes, there were those who believed that some diseases came as a celestial lesson. Fever, punishment for coveting the neighbor's bread. Blisters, sign that you are spiritually in debt. Flu, probably you thought about working less. You decide to apply a little pig fat mixed with herbs, a local recipe that promises to cure everything from a scratch to a failed marriage. The smell is memorable, but you endure it. Worse would be to call the village healer. He charges dearly, spits on the wounds, and says things like that there is bad air from the north. Very technical, very effective, very not. Incidentally, if things get worse, there is always the option of a little medieval opening in the arm. Classic method of dubious health. No, not the drink, the treatment, cutting a little piece of your arm to release the evil. A very popular therapy, especially among those who wanted to lose blood without great reasons. The most curious thing, in many places, this practice was done by barbers. That's right. The same guy who cuts hair also cuts veins. Multifunctional, practical, rustic. Your tooth is also hurting again. The pain goes up the jaw, down the neck, around the ear, and parks in the soul. You try to ignore it, because the alternative is worse. Extraction, without anesthesia, with iron pliers and prayers. Many prayers. Sometimes the pliers are the same ones used to fix a horseshoe, but who cares about that? These are hard times, and rust is just a detail. The curious thing is that even without understanding bacteria or viruses, the crowd in the Middle Ages knew the environment influenced health. They knew that miasmas, the bad airs, caused diseases, wrong, but with style. The problem is that instead of cleaning, they lit incense, threw rotten flowers on the floor, and believed the smell disguised the evil. Spoiler, it didn't disguise it, it just mixed it. In your village, there is an old lady who swears that hanging dried toads on the door prevents epidemics. Another prefers hanging chicken skulls. You just wanted to hang your towel, but a towel here is a luxury item. If you have one, it will serve as a cloth, blanket, handkerchief, diaper, and maybe a birthday candle if you live that long. Your neighbor has been coughing for 4 days. A hollow, wet, worrying cough, the kind you can hear through the wall and the soul. You hope it isn't contagious. But do you know it is? Everyone knows, just no one speaks. Because talking about illness attracts the illness, so folks prefer to pretend he is just reorganizing his lungs. And of course, there is the issue of smells. The Middle Ages is, above all, an olfactory experience. You learn to live with a constant aroma of wet wood, aged sweat, spoiled milk, and occasionally a corpse forgotten behind the barn. Perfume only if it's natural, like crushed garlic or earwax with essence of despair. You go to sleep. Try to, at least. But your head itches, your foot burns, and your stomach complains about the fermented soup. The bed, if we can call it that, creaks more than an old mill. And beside it, a chicken sleeps peacefully. She, yes, smelling good and without a toothache. You close your eyes, but you don't sleep, because on top of everything you know, if you dream of a tooth falling out, it is a bad sign. If you dream of a dry river, even worse. And if you dream of a woman dressed in white calling you to walk, well, better not even get up the next day. And all of this is real, no exaggeration. Every superstition, every remedy, every unexplained itch has a basis in real medieval life. A time when hygiene was synonymous with danger, and any attempt to clean oneself could be confused with witchcraft. Deep down, you learn to live with the smell, with the itch, with the risks. Because in the Middle Ages, living with discomfort is normal. Living without superstition, now that would be strange. You try to distract yourself because living in the Middle Ages is punishment enough. But living isolated without anyone to share the boredom and the cough, that would be too much cruelty. So you decide to take a walk, socialize, see people, try to remember that there is a world beyond the constant itch and the hard, moldy bread. Except, of course, this also has rules. You cannot simply go walking around as if you were the owner of your freedom. The path to the tavern is a journey full of social traps and superstitious outbreaks. On the street, an old lady stops you. She holds a bunch of dried herbs and asks if you saw the strange glow in the sky last night. You lie. You say you slept early. She is suspicious, says that only the restless do not see the signs. And you just wanted to buy onions. Incidentally, seeing shooting stars, comets, an orange moon, all of this in the Middle Ages was a sign of something. No one knew exactly what, but it was certainly bad. Disease, invasion, lost harvest, or one of those collective punishments that come without warning. So it is better not to look at the sky, nor comment to anyone, because if you were the only one who saw it, you become the culprit. You continue walking, trying to dodge the mud, the toothless children, and the adults with theories. But the village is already in an uproar. The gossip of the day. Someone heard a wolf howl 3 times in a row. This, according to the priest, means the village will be visited shortly by dark forces. The baker thinks it is just a wolf with throat problems. And you? You think no one sleeps well around here? At the central well, the conversation revolves around a missing cat, a black cat belonging to the same lady who they say was talking to herself near the forest. Coincidence? In the Middle Ages, coincidence doesn't exist. Guilt exists, and generally it falls on whoever has the greatest number of cats or the smallest number of friends. The logic is simple. If something strange happened and you have minimally different behavior, you are a suspect. Walk alone, suspect. Talk little, suspect. Talk a lot, even more suspect. Walk looking at the ground, you are plotting. Walk looking at the sky, you are invoking. Basically, the error is existing. The tavern, the atmosphere is of friendly distrust. Everyone sitting on crooked benches drinking weak beer, pretending not to be judging others' behavior. But they are, you know. Because if someone drops a mug, people are already murmuring it is bad luck. If someone laughs too loudly, someone whispers, could be an enchantment. And if someone sings an unknown melody, presto, it is a ritual. You try to strike up a conversation, but every conversation slides into something mystical, always. Did you see that mist on the hill yesterday? They say it is a spirit. No, it is the soul of the miller, the one who fled his body when he tripped over the bell. Everything very logical, very convincing, very despairing. Incidentally, the bell. Every village has one, and it isn't just to call for mass. It serves for everything. Warning of plague, warding off storms, scaring away lost souls. If the bell rings out of time, everyone freezes because it could be a sign of mourning, or the arrival of something that shouldn't arrive, or nothing, which is worse because the fear of the vacuum is the most efficient. You realize the village lives in this eternal state of mystical alert. Everything is symbolic, everything is a sign. The candle that goes out alone, visit from the beyond, the spoon that falls on the floor, someone will visit you. The spoon falling concave side up is a good visit. Downward, you can already prepare the prayer. You leave the tavern with more doubts than certainties. The sky has already darkened, and now you need to walk back carefully, because crossing paths with someone at the crossroads is dangerous, even if it is an acquaintance. Actually, especially if it is an acquaintance. What if they are possessed? What if it isn't them anymore? You pick up the pace, but without running, because running at night is suspicious, and making noise can attract bad things. You start to whistle, but stop immediately. Whistling invites entities or scares away the sleep of chickens, which apparently is a sin too. You arrive home, lock the door with the wooden latch, not because it works, but because it is symbolic. And in the Middle Ages, the symbol is more important than efficiency. You light a candle and look at the corner of the room. There is a doll made of straw with stitched eyes and crooked arms. Find it strange? Know that this is protection. Every house has one. Some even have names. And they watch the house while the residents sleep or pretend to sleep. Your doll is named Irmandina. You don't know why, but you think it's better not to argue. Some people say that if you throw the doll away, she returns, and more, offended. You leave her there in the corner, but respectfully. You lie down with a wool sock on only one foot. They say it protects the vulnerable side. With a wooden spoon under the pillow, they say it wards off bad dreams. And with a plate turned over under the bed, they say it doesn't let bad luck rise. And even so, you don't sleep right, because you heard a howl in the distance, and a strange creak on the roof, and someone coughed 3 times in the house next door. And the third cough always means something. You think, do they exaggerate? Is all this just poorly channeled fear? Is superstition just the pretty name for collective panic? And then you remember that last week someone fell off the ladder after not respecting the doll. Coincidence? Better not to doubt. Better to respect. Better to stay very quiet. You wake up before the sun, not out of discipline, but because you had a weird dream about a ladder, a talking fish, and your grandmother pointing at your left foot. And as everyone knows, dreaming of a ladder is a sign of a fall. Fish indicates an unexpected visit, and left foot. Well, you prefer not to even risk leaving the house today. But you leave because no one survives staying inside. Only the rats, and even they live dangerously. So you take a deep breath, check if the sock is on the right side, and step into the street always with the right foot. Yes, because the left, after the dream, is officially cursed indefinitely. On the way, you see an improvised procession. People walking in silence, holding candles, ribbons, and branches. It isn't a holiday. It isn't mass. It is just another collective attempt to balance the village's energies. All because a goat was born with a crooked ear yesterday. And in the Middle Ages, that is enough to become a divine or demonic sign, or both. It will depend on who tells the story. You try to pass unnoticed, but someone hands you a candle. They say if you refuse, the goat's bad luck goes to you. So congratulations. Now you are in a forced spiritual walk, afraid of a goat, and trying not to trip over your own destiny. Up ahead, the leader of the procession is a woman of indefinite age, and eyes that seem to have read your soul without asking permission. She murmurs words in Latin, or in a language that sounds like Latin after 3 beers. She also carries a bag of bones, literally animal bones, they say, or at least that is what everyone prefers to believe. This woman is the official healer, the wise one, the blesser, the good witch. It all depends on the collective mood. She commands respect and fear, a lot of fear. Because if she looks at you askance and your plantation dies afterward, no one will blame the weather. They will blame you for crossing her path without bowing or without giving an egg. Yes, an egg is spiritual currency. It serves to pay for blessings, remove the evil eye, or apologize for sneezing too close. Incidentally, today you should bring her an egg just as a precaution, but you forgot, and now you feel a shiver down your spine. Cold? No. Conscience. During the improvised ceremony, someone mentions the Book of Shadows, which no one has ever seen, but everyone swears exists. A notebook hidden in the forest or under the altar, with recipes for everything from measles to emotional bankruptcy. And if you find this book, better pretend you didn't see it. Touching it can be interpreted as seeking power, and power here is dangerous stuff. People who seek too much end up being invited to a public judgment involving firewood. You disperse from the group and return to your routine. But the day has already started strangely. The village bell rang twice with an interval of 7 beats. This, for those who understand the codes, means someone important will fall. No one knows if it is falling to the ground, falling from grace, or falling into the well, but they will fall. And until discovering who it is, everyone walks slower. Except you, who slips on a turnip peel and already starts to suspect that the chosen one is you. You pass a house with strange symbols drawn on the door, circles, triangles, crooked stars. It is the blacksmith's house. They say he traveled once and came back with knowledge, never explained from where, just says it is for protection, and no one argues because his gate has never fallen, and that around here is already a miracle. Incidentally, miracles happen all the time, according to the residents. Of course, a child who stopped crying alone, miracle. A donkey that returned from the forest without getting lost, miracle. Bread that rose properly, miracle. When in doubt, everything that doesn't go wrong is considered a direct blessing, and everything that goes wrong, a deserved punishment. The balance is simple like that. You arrive at the square. There is a man speaking loudly with a book in his hand. He isn't a priest, but he speaks as if he were. He says he saw the end of times in a dream, and that the sky will collapse in 7 days. People listen, some pray, others make a face like someone who has already given up. And you just think, 7 days is still plenty of time to die of natural causes. Suddenly, a boy runs screaming that he saw a woman flying near the barn. A short flight, but a flight. The village freezes because if confirmed, she could be you know. And then, goodbye tranquility. The buzz starts, the theories, the names circulating. In a few minutes, half the village is suspecting the other half. And you, as always, in the middle of the crossfire with the face of stale bread. Incidentally, stale bread also has a spiritual function. If it molds in the shape of a cross, it is a sign of blessing. If it molds in the shape of a face, beware. And if it doesn't mold, well then everyone panics. Because bread that doesn't spoil might have been made with the help of overly persistent forces. You return home tired, not in the body, but in the soul. Because spending the day trying to survive is already difficult. But spending the day trying not to contradict the invisible, that tires more than pulling a plow with your back. Upon entering, you realize you left your shoe turned sole up. Terrible omen. You correct it immediately, then blow out the candle that lit itself again. And try not to think that this happened for the third time this week. You lie down, look at the ceiling, pray softly just to be sure. After all, in the Middle Ages, even prayer functioned as an amulet, a kind of spiritual antivirus to get through the night. When in doubt, you close your eyes and think of simple things, like bread, dried toad, black chicken, onion on the door, covered mirror, cross made of a fork, and the name of the straw doll that technically still watches you from the shelf. Good night, perhaps, but without much certainty. You even thought superstition was something distant, a detail of life you could ignore, but then you went to the square, not for a public judgment, of course, but to trade flour for a handful of beans, and discovered that in that village stand-up hour, every conversation is a parade of signs, misunderstandings, and secret codes. Someone whispers they saw a crow pecking the tower bell. Someone comments with a serious air that this means a time of divine justice. Someone laughs, someone faints. And you just wanted to trade flour for beans, not become the protagonist of an urban legend. You try to pay for the beans, but the merchant smiles with pity. You understand why. Today is Friday. Friday, in the Middle Ages, was the official day of disgrace, disguised as routine. Starting the day on Friday is practically scheduling coffee with bad luck for after lunch. And then you realize your life is a marathon of institutionalized luck avoidance. You leave the square, but you don't leave the superstition suspect bench. A child eats an apple and doesn't offer half to you. In the medieval head, this means she might be keeping the evil inside the fruit. You mentally give thanks for sleeping distant from that mentality, even though you are living in it. On the way to the field, you meet a traveler. He walks with a tattered cape and a crooked staff. He says he came from a distant city. Where the moon is bigger, the women are less superstitious, and the bread rises by itself. You smile, try to imagine auto-generating bread, even though imagining it is heresy. But the traveler looks at you with such intensity that you choose to thank him and pretend you don't like the bread here because it's bad, when in truth you eat it only because there is no alternative. You say goodbye to the traveler before he enters into a superstition about you. No one likes to become a topic of conversation when passing through. The village is highly sensitive to visits. Visitor, in popular wisdom, is synonymous with future problems. So you return to the safe track. Looking too much at the sky brings rain. Talking to birds brings confusion. Arriving at the field, you take charge of planting a lentil sprout. Lentils by themselves carry symbolic implications of abundance and honest poverty. Gold of the village. But if they sprout too crooked, it is an omen of the election of a tyrant leader. You sigh, if only they would sprout. But that would only happen in an idealized village or in a traveler's dream. As you dig and plant, you listen to a group of women talking about the evil eye. One of them thinks envy is the greatest plague. Another thinks the plague is wanting to explain that envy is superstition. You remain neutral. But think if you should hang garlic in your ears too, just as a precaution, just to ensure nothing enters without you noticing. You finish the manual labor and go to fetch water from the well. You tremble a little, because a well is historically a place of unexpected meetings and unsolicited omens. A spoon falls inside, the spoon you hadn't used since lunch. Every object has a life of its own there, and falling into the well means disappearing. You take a deep breath and throw another spoon in. Now there is despair in a double dose, but at least a motive. You return home with your head boiling with interpretations. Replacing a spoon is an invitation to loss. Exchanging a glance is an invitation to gossip. Changing your thought, well, that can already take you to the bonfire if someone listens. You learn to think quietly. You pass by a mirror, if that term applies to a polished metal sheet with more stains than reflection. You look at a glance, and remember that looking in the mirror at night can show more than your face, and you can't handle that responsibility. You arrive home, take a sip of water, without blessing because water is also serious business, and sit down to rest. The head hurts, not because of the work, but because thinking all day without mental relief is worse than cutting onions with joy. What comes to mind? A fragment. No one ever dresses in red here, because red is the color of warning. You cross paths with someone in the market wearing a red tunic once, and the gossip went around the whole village. In the same way that you are now super hungry for silence, you decide to light a candle, just a weak beam of light. Not to illuminate, but to scare away the darkness. And as a bonus, memorize that darkness is more dangerous when it is unannounced. Before lying down, you find an old pamphlet with drawings of open hands, sigil against spells. You take it, use it as an improvised bookmark. After all, a page marked with coarse salt is reading protection. Yes, reading can also bewitch you, especially if it is a prayer book which can call divine attention, and attention here is always a risk. You lie down carefully. Try not to sense that tomorrow will be more of the same, an infinite line of small actions loaded with meaning and medieval irony. You close your eyes, try not to think about a spoon sinking in the well, or a mirror lens that doesn't reflect right, drops of salt drying on paper, and beans that might talk if they wanted to. But it tires. Even convinced that the mind needs rest, you know that tomorrow it will wake up wanting to decipher more signs. Even if it is just to remember why you complain about knocking on wood today, you do not dream, or rather you do not allow yourself to remember. Because dreaming too much in the Middle Ages is almost asking to become a superstition plot. Dreamt of fire? It is a sign of war. Dreamt of water? Disease? Dreamt of a tooth falling out? Better revise the will if you have one, of course, and if you don't, bad luck for you. Or, as the village residents would say, bad luck, period. You wake up to the sound of thunder in the distance. It isn't raining, but the noise is already enough to cause an argument. At your door, two neighbors debate whether the thunder came from the sky or if it was a warning scream from some ancestral spirit. You prefer not to opine. You have seen people disappear for opining wrong, or just for opining. You leave the house, but first do the usual ritual. 3 knocks on the wooden latch to ward off bad luck, a low whistle to confuse evil spirits, and a little look at the sky with the left eye closed, because they say this blocks bad intentions. No one knows who invented this, but everyone does it. And no one dares to change, because the last one who changed, well, no one remembers him, literally. On the way to the field, you pass a bush with a red ribbon tied to it. Someone lost a relative recently, or lost a chicken. Here, mourning is versatile, and the ribbon is symbolic protection against forgetting and against creatures of the forest. And no, they aren't bears or wolves. They are the things we don't name. Yes, the Middle Ages loves a mystery without a name, probably because the name attracts. You approach the mill, but something is wrong. No one speaks loudly, no one smiles. It is a day of collective silence. Reason? Someone dreamt of a candle dripping on the wrong side. You don't know which is the right side and don't want to know. You just accept. You walk as one who walks on sacred territory, or at least cursed only at the edges. On the mill wall, someone drew an eye. Just one, because two would already be considered a provocation. The single eye watches, protects, wards off what is no good. In theory. In practice, it serves only to remind that no one is safe, not even from others' imaginations. Further ahead, you meet a gentleman carrying a sack of wheat, but he stops beside you, cracks a suspicious smile and asks, "Did you see the white rat last night?" You pretend yes, because saying, "I didn't see it," might sound like, "I am not worthy of visions." And here, being unworthy is as dangerous as being illuminated. The ideal is to be invisible. You exchange a few words about the wind. Another great mystical communicator. If the wind blows from the south, good news. From the north, complications. From the east, forced marriage. From the west, better not even leave the house. And today's wind spiraled. This means divine indecision, the worst of all. You return to the village with a constant feeling that you are always on the edge of something. Of patience, of reality, of common sense, and of the collective judgment that always prowls. Suddenly someone screams that they saw a woman in white near the church. The chaos begins in slow motion. First, the priest blesses himself 8 times in a row. Then the baker locks the bakery. And finally, the candle lady starts singing a chant without lyrics, just sounds. Because humming confuses the beyond, or attracts it. No one is certain. You decide to hide for a while. You go to the barn, where superstitions are less aggressive, or at least more spaced out. There, fear concentrates in the shadows, because according to the oldest, a shadow that moves without light is a warning. You sit in the hay, watch a cockroach pass slowly. A cockroach that walks slowly is a blessing. A cockroach that runs, bad luck. A cockroach that flies, miniature apocalypse. And yes, all of this has a name, a ritual, and an old man in the village who swears he recorded everything in a book no one has ever seen. The Book of Small Daily Catastrophes must be mandatory reading somewhere in the beyond. Outside, the storm that didn't come starts to seem more real. The clouds accumulate like someone holding a grudge, and you know that if it rains with a crosswind, you will have to bury a salt rock in the yard, simply because that is how it is. And if you forget, the harvest comes out crooked, and if it comes out crooked, it is your fault. And if it is your fault, better start running. And running here is more suspicious than standing still on top of a dry branch. You decide to return home. On the way, you see a child playing with a stone, but she stops, stares at you and says, "You will stumble today." You freeze. Children in the Middle Ages are basically walking oracles. They don't know the weight of what they say, or maybe they do. The problem is that the universe listens, and the medieval universe is very resentful. You arrive home and check everything. The spoon under the pillow, the straw doll in the corner facing north, the blue ribbon on the window, everything in order. But something is wrong. You feel a strange silence, a light smell of burnt incense, even though you didn't light anything. Maybe it's just the neighbor trying to ward off bad dreams, or maybe it's just Tuesday, which around here also carries its own dose of spiritual weirdness. You sit on the bed and think about all the unwritten rules. Don't point at stars, don't speak the name of the departed 3 times in a row, don't sew at night, don't whistle inside the house, don't clean the broom on a windy day, don't look into the bottom of the well, don't leave bread upside down, don't wish for anything while looking at the bonfire, and principally, never, never underestimate the power of a prediction made by a sneezing pig. It is a lot of rules for little logic, but the whole village believes, because the alternative would be admitting that nothing makes sense. And that, for a world where the only thing worse than fear is the void, would be unbearable. You lie down, listening to the wind, the rooster missing the time, and the voice of someone whispering a prayer outside. Don't look out the window. Have you learned? The day begins with that indefinable odor that you don't know if it comes from the tavern, the barn, or the soul of someone who passed by. And the truth is, no one expects a bath every single day. But there were people who even tried. In larger centers, those who could afford it opened the tap into a basin or an improvised barrel. As for the poorer, they wiped a damp cloth on their face, arms, feet. Simple things, but noted as minimum education in medical manuals of the time. A neighbor more groomed than the rest rubs his face with a cloth soaked in vinegar and olive oil. Classic recipe against odors and throat bad luck. And there is the story about the famous Four Thieves vinegar, an infusion of herbs solely against plague, among them garlic, rosemary and sage. They say the thieves used it in the middle of the plague outbreak and weren't affected. Medieval life didn't tire of trying to be efficient. Later, a muffled sound coming from the monastery next door catches your attention. It is the noise of water being poured into a collective wash basin. There, monks washed their hands before meals. There were even taps and towels. Decoration more primitive, but functional. As you watch from afar, you think that even without understanding everything about germs, that hygiene was already seen as appropriate in certain places. In the market, bags of clothes hanging in the sun receive a call of respiration. The night air, they say, cleans. On the farm, clothes were beaten with dry branches and ashes, cleans dirt and bad humors according to local beliefs. If the fabric had herbs like lavender or rosemary, even better, perfume and mobile disinfection. A man mixes ash, salt, and a little water to clean his hands before handling food. He repeats the gesture whenever he tests a truffle or manipulates cheese. It was socially acceptable and recommended, especially when cutlery was still a rarity in humble homes. Think about it. Before eating, washing hands wasn't modern freshness. It was etiquette and self-protection. In the meantime, you pass a house where someone cleans their face with open branches of sage. They say it opens the pores of luck, and if strange airs enter, the fault is the stagnant water. That's why it was common to boil or perfume the water before using. A way of saying, I am not foolish, I am protected. Arriving at the church, you hear the priest speak about the value of washing hands before receiving the sacred bread as a spiritual reference and rudimentary medical practice. Less symbolism and more frills than it seems, hygiene and belief side by side. Outside, a child bites a hawthorn branch as if it were a lollipop. Common thing. Chewing herbs was a way to relieve toothache or freshen the mouth. Others put cloves. Spices were champions of disguising bad breath in the mouth. Dentist, zero, clove and chewed twig, natural miracle. Next, the smell changes, becomes more pasteurized. It is the steam of the public bathhouse, the neighborhood's improvised spa. In these places, many people bathed even together without those rules of exclusive comfort. No cubicle, no private touch. It was part of urban life, and many took the opportunity to exchange gossip, drink hot water, and pretend they were relaxing in a spa, only without ambient music, just the weekly chronicle of the scoundrels. Then back to routine. Rotating the broom opposite the door, cleaning from back to front, sweep what remained out, not in. Superstition or precaution, it doesn't matter. It functions as a social command. Just don't get it wrong, right? Before sleeping, you wet a cloth in perfumed vinegar and wipe it on your wrist. Spiritual protection and against the smell of rats in the dawn. Then you put a little handful of coarse salt in the angle of the door, a measure against envy, against bad-tempered spirits, against delayed visits, all symbolic, but the mind already adjusts to the ritual. Finally, you whisper a good night without looking in the mirror. Because a mirror extinguished at night is fire in the mystical playground. It can reveal more than your unilluminated face. You prefer the safe dark. The dust on the window falls as if telling ancient stories. It was once so high that it formed abstract drawings on the glass, because glass was luxury and drawings were the advantage of windless time. The air enters heavy, carrying the smell of dry herb and burnt bread. A smell that says, "Here exists life, but someone forgot to clean." Inside, the ritual begins with a saucer. Yes, that one for cold soup placed on the door threshold. It works miracles of protection, they say, against envy and gossip. The trick is old. The leftover broth with paprika or herbs functions as an invisible barrier. And no one explains why it works, but it works so well that if you miss this saucer, you run the risk of being washed in the gossip of the whole village. So you enter, bless yourself, and scare away bad breath with mint sprigs crushed in the palm of your hand. Protocoller, as if the ashes of the ritual had smelled good. Incidentally, smelling was more than breathing, it was diagnosis. The smell of sweat, mixed with earth and steeped nettle tea, defined if the day would be one of health or if fever would decide to appear at night. In the pantry, legumes stored in clay pots breathe their own aroma of eternity. Lentils, dry beans, cereals transform the cabinet into a reliquary of possibility. But some people still trust bells attached to the lid to keep insects and the evil eye far from the food. Some believe light noises scare away things that hide, and it works. In a way, it's enough to hop around for 2 hours before the meal, pretending to be a folkloric symphony. In the corridor, a cabinet covered by hemp, rosemary for clear thinking, rue for cleaning the environment, and a handful of bay leaves to call good luck, especially if mixed with dry beans inside the bag. The dried herbs sway with the wind that escapes through the crack in the window. The sound is soft, like the whisper of an ancient secret, and calms the spirit. The kitchen is all this alchemy, cauldrons where onion skins and eggshells are boiled. That's right, to dye fabrics and ward off bad symbologies. Whoever buys clothes dyed with this sauce thinks they are wearing protection, even if they are only disguising the tone of the worn fabric. Children of the house fiddle with garlic skins on the collar of the tunic, light as protective pendants and dull for visitors who find the slight light coming off the tooth strange. But whoever walks with this talisman, avoid talking to people without looking in the eyes, for it deviates. And then, my friend, the shine becomes a bad omen for neglecting the point of contact. In the yard, a dry and curved branch protects the pots. They say a curve wards off curious looks, scares away pinches of bad luck and bad moods. If anyone asks, you smile like someone who knows too much and continue sweeping, because sweeping, drawn in a circle behind the door, also helps to collect fragments of unpleasant events that try to escape through the threshold. When exhaustion hits, that basic tonic appears, a mixture of water, vinegar, mint leaves, and locks of hair. The mixture serves as an energizing lotion and prevention. After all, hair held secrets of your life force. A poorly kept strand could become a path for others' magic. And messing with locks was serious business, best to draw from memory with caution. The routine follows the rhythm of a lantern trembling on the wall. The clearest sign that entering total pitch blackness can awaken silent things, distant voices, creaking furniture, echo of others' breathing. But that is the effect of wood against the cold, right? Or is it something reading you? Better not ask. In the bedroom, the straw mattress murmurs. Each tuft has its own routine. Cloth pillow housed small oracles. Some people slept with wet breadcrumbs under the pillow to dream of prosperity. If the bread dawned dry, good sign. Otherwise, some spiritual provision was necessary. The window gains a patch of dried moss disguised as dried flour. Protection against currents of regret. Air that enters without asking starts making pickles in people's livers. But no one explains. Simple to understand. Entered air is where the improbable lives. Better to plug it. In the silence that descends with the moon appears a small wooden box with scribbled runes. It houses a key holder. From it come whispered prayers. In case someone calls for the uncalled, one opens this little box with care and offers a prayer. Done. No lockups. Period in devotion and express protection. Finally, you peek at the door with a wooden ruler. The one turned inward serves as an invitation for good rest. It is like a cherry on top of the night. The right side guarantees that, while you rest, your presence doesn't escape through where you brought noise. And this, my dear dreamer in training, makes a difference. And then, without realizing, the body relaxes. This mind perhaps continues awake, noting every strange gesture that became routine. Like medieval life, it isn't logical, it isn't glamour, but it has the charm of survival with color and smell, just lowering the cloth of modernity. You hear a crack in the trunk of the wooden ceiling, instinctively look up. But it wasn't a rat or wind, just wood against the silence. Even so, the body regresses. Cracking like that is a sign of a presence that doesn't respect schedules or lyrics of a badly intoned song. Melancholy, or just the reality of living in an old shack. Better not speculate. In the kitchen, the cauldron bubbles with water and onion peel. Silly recipe, but mentioned in ancient circles as a spiritual absorbent. It serves to clean the pot and ward off crossed looks. And it worked. No one wanted a smelly and cracked pot. Avoided comments about your creaking bones. On the counter, a handful of wasted salt fell, slipped between cedar and clay. Here comes the automatic reflex. Throw a pinch over the left shoulder. Not out of modern superstition, but out of ancestral fear of blinding hungry spirits. Better to prevent than to summon. Stored foods gain a layer of dried leaves. Besides being aromatic, they are talismans against infestation and the evil eye. You yourself carve Roman numerals on the grain pot, a sign of a good harvest and a warning of care. If anyone asks, say it is just medieval organization. Mark to know if there is left over for the next harvest. And no one fights over old things. Realistic scenario. The kettle hisses, hissing ancient temperaments and waking up those who slept with leg pain. A lit candle makes a circle of light and can go out, classic omen of unwanted visit. You light another, whisper, "Go away, soul lady," and the candle stays lit. Good effect. The room smells of smoky incense, resin that burns for too long and impregnates the walls with company witchcraft protection. Only the smell sticks more than overly used fabric. It tires, but gives mental relief. Each pyramid of smoke that rises is like an invisible grate on the mountain of anxiety. A neighbor arrived with a sack of charcoal. Sack is a symbol of old money. Placing charcoal at the door prevents malice and bluffing. A thing of well-structured superstition. Old money, spirit in debt, burnt charcoal, debt paid with protective smoke. It makes sense in the medieval head. In the fireplace, someone hangs a sprig of bay leaf. A gesture repeated by many protects the home and adorns with aroma. People who knew the art of plants trusted this mixture of fragrance and soft spell, aroma of dried leaves and hope. Finally, when the night covers everything, a corner of the house receives a grain of rice forgotten next to the chimney hole. They say ancient grains bring abundance and distract evil spirits with fake food. Strategy. Distraction is better than confrontation, especially if the potential threat is a frog at the door or mold on the food. While the head grows heavy, the ritual continues. Folding dried herbs, blowing out 2 candles, leaving the pot lid open. Letting the spirit of the day escape symbolically, and pouring a drop of olive oil on the rim of the cup, essential to ward off discomforts that pass through gulps that are too long. And this back and forth of small actions, a mixture of practical habits with mysticism, is your continuous relief. Medieval life can be chaotic, but there is method in the manias. Keeping the incense burning, the salt in the corner and the rice in the wrong place, is the unfiltered version of emotional defense, but it works when rest escapes faster than a candle's shadow. Now, without warning, silence returns. The house, or your clan of habits, relaxes, but the senses remain attentive to nuances. A crack in the trunk, the whisper of cans creaking outside, the strange rustle of leaves in the corridor. These are light signs, but enough to keep the heart curious, ready for the next ritual of defense against the invisible absurd. The fireplace hissed as if complaining of the ancient cold. The crackling of the cool trunk complained of your presence before even waking up. Even in a small space, every sound gains the weight of an oracle. You barely breathe and already perceive if any movement was simple or a harbinger of an unwanted visit. On the floor, dried onion peels exhale a rustic aroma that should be wisdom, but it serves more as an entry door for others' speculation. In the old days, scattering these peels acted as a repellent against hunger spirits, it is believed. Today, it is just kitchen smell, but tradition persists and forgives the aroma. Near the improvised table, crushed bay leaves accompany a small bowl with coarse salt, tangible bodyguard. You run your hand over the contents and whisper internally, "It's there, ready to act." It is an almost involuntary ritual, repeated so many times it became automatic defense. Symbolically speaking, pushing away invisible darlings also needs to be routine. When the time comes to make the bed, they scare away an unsuspecting mosquito. For the elders, an insect that flies late carries secrets. Better to scare it away with a discreet blow and continue acting as if nothing happened. After all, there are unwritten codes about the noises of the night, and whoever manages to scare it away without fright wins a pass to sleep more peacefully. On the wall, a painted clay saucer, work of someone who mixed art and superstition, functions as a symbolic circle of protection. The paintings are not just ornament, they serve to confuse the alien eye. If someone knocks at the door, they probably see the pattern and pass on without investigating. Art became strategic disguise. Meanwhile, an old man carefully cleans an iron knife. A sharp blade is not just a kitchen tool. In local legends, a good cut drawn on the skin forms a barrier against insistent ghosts. A poorly made cut, on the contrary, can open a path for busybodies from the beyond. Technique of invisible bargaining. The broom rests supported on the window frame, not out of laziness, but to prevent the entry of bad breath from the night wind. They say a crosswind brings bad thoughts. So positioning the broom occupies exactly 5 minutes of rest and saves your mind from alleged nocturnal attacks. At the height of the night, a fungus was born in the corner of the room. Mold, lord of bad sensations, usually a harbinger of domestic decline. But since no one wants to admit weakness, one places a cloth wet with vinegar over it. Creterological technique of luck containment. It solves nothing but disguises and gives symbolic work. The water bowl next to the bed stays with a petal floating. A species of cold flame in liquid supposedly attracts soft dreams. Forgetting the petal there, omen of nightmare. So, careful not to sleep before positioning the flower. The window remains ajar because closing it totally is inviting locked breathing and nervous dreams. And within this flow of silent maneuvers arrives the almost audible, yet contained, prayer. If something comes, let it knock lightly. I am too tired for debate. It summarizes the protection of one who lives, watching the routine like an oracle disguised as a home. With the body complaining for a better position, the blankets help to format a ritual of accommodation. Folding the tips outward. It looks messy, but serves as a symbolic shield against the energy that rolls uphill. Taking care when adjusting the sheet avoids the unintentional stomp, opening a channel for bad luck. These are minutiae that balance sleep and disquiet. And in the silence that finally establishes territory, your mind dances with fragments. The smell of bay leaves, the noise of wood, forgotten rice, salt in the corners, fungus swallowing a ceiling. It is an imperfect, ancestral, practical, domestic symphony, full of survival. There are those who say one can live better, far from this system of weird precautions. But frankly, feeling the stomach buckled by mystical precaution always seems safer than risking a night without a vinegar stain or coarse salt. After all, the objection of sleeping with an exposed soul is worse than decorative indignity. Just placing something old, broken, boiled, or red on the entrance track became a talisman. They are improvised barriers, but they work by the same principle as invisible blocks. They offer occupation to the vacant mind, which, if it wanders too much, makes an inventory of nightmares. And that is a trap. The breathing is already smooth. The house murmurs in the rhythm of a dying lantern. Every small gesture became a mental wall. Every object out of place could transform into a portal. So, accommodating the sheet, adjusting the saucer, and moving a strand of hair by the edge of the pillow became an obstacle to collective or overly individual invasions. In the end, the noise that mattered wasn't the noise of the world outside, but the generic quiet of the body giving in. And even if the silence is suspicious, it has the power to make sleep arrive, even if late and distrustful. The road dawns cold, but it is infested with murmurs. A bent old lady offers you her hand with a smile that is more warning than invitation. She squeezes your hand firmly, looks fixedly in your eyes and says, "Today I counted pebbles in the purse." A simple gesture, but one that means, "I am monitoring your future." You thank her with dusted shoulders and continue. Because refusing this touch of popular contemplation here would be like leaving without shoes at a funeral. It made few survivors. Further ahead, the mill turns calmly, pretending normality. The miller, accustomed to the old trick, pours flour into a small cloth bag and hangs it behind the trough with a red wool thread. Basket of protection against neighbors' rancor and disguised envies. You walk through there and feel the soft aroma of wheat. Just that is enough to remind you that in this universe, food is more than nutrition. It is routine armor. In the market, there is a tube with mint oil used to relieve vomiting, spasms, and restless spirit. Buyers involuntarily wipe their forehead, their wrist, a quick, inspired, and preventive movement. You imitate because it costs nothing and might ward off something you can't even define. Preventing via aroma is as legitimate as blowing out a candle on a cake. In a corner, someone shares a piece of charcoal passed 3 times in the fireplace smoke with whoever arrives. They say the gesture purifies what arrives. You breathe the light soot and feel something internal relax. The breeze of the shadow is less toxic when it brings a promise of prevention. And that is all you need in this exact second. The day heats up and a child appears singing a silly rhyme. Between the sound and the wind, whoever didn't laugh felt the time. Yes, cute rhyme, but here everything is a warning. If you laugh too much or too little, it becomes a topic of analysis. Balance is a rarity more valued than forged iron. You cross paths with an old man holding a boiling kettle mixed with lemon peels and rosemary branches. He says it is a bath for divine vision. That is, it cures anything that arrives from the street, including neighbors with sharp looks. You look and think, whoever invented this had a talent for mixing aromas with tranquility. Further ahead at the end of the street, a scholarly Frenchman recites disconnected phrases about a crescent moon and lizards crossing paths, generates collective discomfort. Stay alert, warns the girl from the tavern, and you, pretending naturalness, kiss her thumb in silent approval. Because aligning yourself with the collective avoids the label of dangerous eccentric. You pass through an alley where a bag of feathers faces the wind. It is mouth protection if some speech escapes. The feathers intercept. Nocturnal laughter interrupted by goose feather. Only a medieval person would find logic in that, but it works. Muffled noise, contained speech, decorative silence. When you arrive home, you realize your fingernails have grown and accumulated dirt underneath. In your world, clean nails are a sign of virtue. long ones, lust or carelessness with the royalty of hygiene. So you cut them carefully, one by one, and indicate to the world, you still have control, and that is already a victory. You sit down, look at the sky through the big window between the boards, clouds move lazily, a crow passes, drops feces, quick omen rises, crow flew, drought comes, crow pooped, rain waits, ugly face, luck slipped. And you just sigh, overflowing with late skepticism. The fireplace snores lightly. The hot fire is an invitation for cold reflection. Life is full of these micro-rituals, small daily choreographies like cross the sock, blow the salt, recite the brief prayer, clean the nail, react carefully to the joke. And all of this chains together in a ballet whose finale rarely brings applause, but brings relief. You gather the chores, the cooled pot, the broken cup, the china cabinet that lights up, a set of domestic ruins that breathe. And breathing here is already a choice of wisdom. Even if wisdom is continuing to live in a village where every step earns an invisible comment. Knowing this, you adjust the pillow, align sheets, put a handful of herbs in the pillow again, as if it were a placebo, but with similar function. Places aroma of quiet underneath your trembling dreams. And since it worked so far, at least the heart doesn't snore as loudly as yesterday, it is tolerable. Outside, a carriage passes. Sounds of wheels and horse is a background program without direct mystical purpose. But it is counted as a reminder that the world spins faster than the tranquility of this village. And comfort around here is an anomaly. But you still breathe, and that already counts as an emotional endurance marathon. In the silence that descends with the night, you hear the wind rummage through the cloth on the window, a whisper that means rest arrives, but with dominance, distrust. There are times when this tension is more effective than a long prayer, because whoever sleeps with an open soul becomes conversation for mold rats and people who find too much explanation. Here, without realizing, you get used to a survival system where superstition and routine merge. And faced with this, it might seem that this world was just comical, but it was life. Life washes feet, mixes coarse salt, keeps the spoon in place, fears the loose joke, and respects the mold in the corner. Perhaps it is better this way, surviving with eccentric precautions than facing a graceless void. Sleeping has become an exercise in interior diplomacy. Just for that, you should send a mental thank you to the old medieval wheel of fortune, the one that turns without you choosing, and decides if the day will treat you well or push you to the slippery ramp of the main street. Yes, the image of the wheel full of sovereigns turning into statistics of bad luck was more real than you would like to admit. Early in the morning, while kneading bread, a sigh escapes. 4 cloves stuck in are not just seasoning, but an ancestral talisman to avoid envy and a practical way to perfume the kitchen, which otherwise would smell of old sweat and thin flour. It smells of precaution there, almost palpable, mixed with the aroma of Sunday. In the yard, a man scatters branches of consecrated flowers in the corners of the house. They say they help to divert storms. Here, a storm is bad, of course, but a storm that speaks is a test from the sky. It is even worse. Only those who have had a roof threatening to collapse due to a suspicious cloud understand this complex economy of climate protection. Further ahead, an old weird umbrella serves to scare away the evil eye on a sunny day. Yes, because the look of the cross does not depend on the weather. You cover the windows with care. There are people who swear that the cleanest mirror reflects envy. So, there it is. Dusty mirror softens the mirror of the soul. You watch children handing apple branches to those entering the village, attached to red threads. It is not decoration. It was a guarantee that the hunger of the road would be consumed before reaching the door. Apple branch, sign of peace and distraction. Red thread, disguise for the soul tired of travel. The little ones sell cheap protection and you laugh, trying not to appear sarcastic. Because here, political sarcasm can turn into social prayer. Gradually, the day turns into a rumor of a storm. Not outdoors, just word of mouth from the sweeping lady. They said the priest found a fungus in the sacristy. Plague is coming. You hold back laughter, but dryly put on a necklace of coarse salt that you christen the necklace of rural diplomacy. Because just in case, think of the tempestari, those so-called weather wizards, people who, according to rumors, sent rain or sun, according to the village's happiness, joint respect and fear. If you wanted, you could sign up as a weather apprentice, but the greatest trick is to survive without trying to control the wind. Behind the house, an improvised wooden panel has nails and divine nutrition. That is, an extinguished candle never signals ignorance. It is a technique of peace with the beyond. A candle burning yellow, good sign. All of this is part of domestic technomysticism. You take a mug of water, throw a grain of sugar in there to sweeten tomorrow. It works like sweet superstition, like wishing luck with sugar. Except sometimes tomorrow comes bitter anyway, more neuro-linguistic than faith, but it helps. Later you find a polished river pebble near the door, an amulet. They say it avoids optional stumbling. Someone forgot and fell. You don't want to be that person. Inside the house, a broken piece of mirror is covered. Breaking a mirror here is worth 7 years of bad luck. And it wasn't a joke. If this is Greek heritage, the mania stuck with medieval force indeed. Better to cover it than to face a fracture of the soul or pajamas with a fracture of luck. On the wall, a drawing of a wheel, not of fortune but of a mill, became a metaphor. A mill that ground grain becomes a wheel that grinds bad luck. But be careful. Whoever tries to scribble the wheel too much becomes a cursed artist. What counts is the image, not the intention. And it persists. Night falls. 3 knocks on the quince tree supported on the window serves to scare away the silence, the rest of the wind. And when you sleep, try to memorize that. Even being anxious maintenance, this combo of cloves, salt, branches, flower coins and paintings disguises fear like an old rug. You step on it and pretend comfort. What comes next is the peace of an improvised tent. Rare, unstable, but still shelter, with the certainty that tomorrow you will wake up again to negotiate between superstition, survival, and a globality that finds you crazy for trusting wooden forks as wise guardians. Upon opening your eyes, you realize the bedroom dawned empty but not silent. It is silence with texture, the kind that weighs on the eardrums and invites you to retreat into bizarre thoughts about trumpeting chickens and prophetic onions. You sit up, look at the walls and realize surviving in an environment where every crack, every eggshell and every cinnamon stick has a spiritual function is an art of emotional juggling. You stand up slowly. First gesture, check if the pillow still has the handful of herbs, resting like a flag of surrender, protection against persistent dreams. If it's not there, silent prayer. If it is, thank and adjust as if it were a security certificate. After all, sleeping with an exposed soul was never an option. You walk to the fireplace, light the fire with care, not for heat, but to break the fast of sound and soft light. The crackling of the wood sounds like welcoming conversation. And all you want to hear that morning is familiar noise, even if disguised as a narrow-minded ritual. You open the window just a little so that no mysterious wind enters, but enough for the aroma of fresh bread to invade the room. Breathe. This bread, still hard inside, is edible consolation. You eat a piece and return to life its credit of human warmth. At this point, you realize medieval survival. It rhymes with bread that breaks teeth but still satiates. You sit at the simple table and look at the small symbols that accumulated value. the crooked saucer that became an invisible shield, the salt shaker lid permanence, the handful of coarse salt suspended with cold thread above the door. They are there as silent guardians of human fragility, and you feel strange thanking them mentally because they don't speak, but they work. You take a breath and continue. You wash your hands in a rustic bucket, but with grass and vinegar. Archaic substitution for the do-it-for-precaution leaflet. The first sip of water after this gesture tastes like victory. And just as well, because victory and water were also abundant in the Middle Ages when they had them. Look around. The house seems less like a village and more like a human mind, full of small illusions of macabre care, masks made of cloves, aroma of herb held in the mouth, firewood stacked to hold back the bad breath of the previous night. All these details tell that living is occupying every crevice with hope disguised as superstition. The day unfolds with the slowness of honey, melting into patience. The routine, dust on the veranda, broom in a circle, spoon turned on the plate, isn't just custom, it is a mundane defense system, and you learn that if something goes right on a day like this, the magic was minimal. Surviving is sufficient. Later, crossing paths with a neighbor, he comments on the crow leaning on the eave. Just smile because today is Friday, and Friday carries fame, but not necessarily destiny. Laughing at superstition is risking summoning the invisible world to the conversation. So you smile as if you understood and would prefer to continue ignoring. You return to the domestic refuge. Finally, put on wool socks, because a bare foot here attracts the attention of wind, dirt, and misfortune. You have given up delaying. It is about heat and caution. The best medicine that exists and hasn't been banned from the soul's shelf yet. The lantern lit with a lazy eye, but lit. You can read the marks in the dry grass. Check if the spiderweb grew one more thread. Insignificant details become mundane mentorship, and observing this is an exercise in conscious presence. Every stunted thread is a history of vile trauma. Every web is a reminder that no one needs to clean everything, just enough to continue breathing without alarms. Then comes the last moment of symbolic dexterity of the day. Folding the blanket with extremities strategically turned inward. It helps to secure what escaped the rest of the house, fine-tuning between organization and superstition, a technique of securing before dropping the body on the old straw mattress that reproduces the fetal position. And when you lie down in the dark, all that remains is to pray in silence. May the superstition outside do the favor of ignoring your bed for a whole night. You close your eyes with that slight sensation of duty fulfilled. Yes, surviving a day sentimentally enchanted by surreal practices is also a conquest. Because in the balance of beliefs, every root that didn't grow on the wrong side, every spoon that didn't become an omen, every splash of salt correctly thrown, became a small victory. And seen this way, there is beauty in this rustic insistence of trying every day to stay whole. Good night, weary listener, and until next time. Sleep with a tired story.